Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining. I know we're kind of all different times here, so it's where I'm at Saturday night at 7 p.m. Because I'm actually in St. Louis, Missouri. So I'll kind of start with the kind of complimentary, or not complimentary, but the compulsory introduction. So my name is Gene Feldman. I am one of the training managers for the sales team for Nestle Purina North America. So I help our sales folks sell to our customers across the consumer product goods landscape for the pet category. So that's kind of where I'm at. And a lot of my role is to find new training technologies rather than getting a new technology and just kind of throwing it out there, hoping it sticks, being very methodical. So because the majority of my background is from high school and post or secondary education, all the way through curriculum development and design for Fortune 500 companies. So I kind of been around the gambit, and VR has kind of been a passion project for me for a majority of my education career. It's just over the past couple of years that VR has actually become a viable conversation. So, as we talk about, if you guys have any questions, please ask. What I really try to do in these conversations is give you the steps to replicate and why you need to replicate it. So this isn't me stroking my ego on look at all the cool things I did. This is more of here's how I got it through the system. Here's how I got the arguments beat, and here's some of the results we're starting to see. So as we get into it, first we need to understand where training and development is right now. Uh, for the past probably 2,000 years, training and teaching hasn't changed since Socrates first asked why. So it's been very much the Socratic method of lecture, followed by discussion, followed by some type of practice. Now we know when in the business world, when push comes to shove, usually practice is what's eliminated because we always go into that mindset, okay, I have to make sure I tell them everything. And so in order to tell them everything, we have to extract time from somewhere. And so the practice usually is where we see a lot of suffering. But throughout this, we've seen some great new technologies emerging that really can change the landscape as far as training and development. Now, the biggest one that we're going to talk about is virtual reality and augmented reality and utilizing that type of technology. And there's several reasons why. So the big thing is that we need to remember is that learning is anything that changes behaviors or results of experience. It's our experience that dictates whether we learn or not, because we'll change our behavior. It's why when we're very little, we learn very early to avoid bright orange things, whether it's hot or not. We have imprinted on that experience. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to training and development, and a lot of skills, you have to, we always call it trial by fire. We're going to throw them to the wolves. They have to learn um, in action. Now, the problem with that is there's two key things for good learning to occur. One is it's got to be in a safe, comfortable environment that fosters failure. But also it's got to be repetitive. It's got to be consistent. And so VR allows us to create that safe, comfortable environment that is very consistent, that gives um, experience to decisions and actions that people make without any real world consequence. So basically, it gives us a place to mess up and not hurt anything. So that's what we're really seeing why VR is really kind of capturing it. And like I said, VR's had 20 plus years of false starts. Every couple of years, VR rears its ugly head and says, I'm here, and the technology just can't keep up the hardware. Well, we're finally at a point where the hardware is, I mean, it's set, we're ready. So now it's scrambling, trying to develop the experiences because we're learning that developing a VR experience is very different than developing an e-learning course, and so really realizing that some of the It really is a new paradigm in training. So as I talk about VR, so the first thing, as you start having conversations, as you start developing use cases, as you're really starting to explore, and even throughout your exploration, you need a well of inspiration to pull from. But you also need something that people can understand, especially people in finance or people that just technology's not their thing. Their thing is numbers. They're worried about the cost overhead, all of that. So a lot of these inspirations and visuals really give us some ideas of what can we do and helps win those arguments. So the first one was Jules Verne. Jules Verne, huge innovation idea man. Yeah, I mean, as you read through his books in the late 1800s, I mean, we can see, from the computer to scuba diving to the submarine, to even Zoom, what we are doing right now, Jules Verne predicted over 200 years ago. I mean, when we really think about it, that's unbelievable. But imagine trying to tell somebody, okay, when video conferencing was first starting, well, rather than saying imagine, going, well, in Jules Verne's novel, they had this really neat idea, and this is what we could possibly do with it. Same with Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry. We all walk around to this day with tricorders around us all the time. Our smartphones do everything a tricorder was predicted to do. You know, um, Down to the holodecks. As we're talking about VR, so we're seeing pop culture really dictate how technology is going to go, but also it enables people to accept the technology long before it's invented. The day a lightsaber is invented, you won't have to convince anybody it's a great invention. We're already set to know that we want lightsabers, and so that's where really this well comes from. Now, some other great areas, I kind of put a timeline in to kind of show how VR over the past 30, 40 years has been a mainstay in Hollywood. We've seen different ideas, but again, these are ideas that you can pull from as you're developing different experiences. One experience I'm developing now is a merge between the Doctor Who TARDIS and Superman's Fortress of Solitude. I mean, so that's where you can really start pulling this stuff. And so Tron, great one, kind of where the whole thing starts. Most people, when you start talking about VR, and this is why I even bring this list in, is when I first started having these conversations about 3 years ago internally, people kept saying, "Oh, that's like Minority Report." They immediately start pulling connections to movies they've seen. So, by compiling a list, we can start referring to movies that a majority of our workforce, majority of our associates have seen, that gives them those visuals to kind of understand what we're going to do. Now, out of this whole list, the one movie I honestly I would recommend, I truly recommend, because it was such a revolutionary idea at the time, was 1983's Brainstorm. It was Natalie Wood. For those of us that love our movie trivia, it was Natalie Wood's last movie. And in it, what the whole idea was, recording somebody's memory brainwaves and being able to replay it and relive it in VR. So, I mean, for 1983, very, very cutting edge kind of concept. So, but again, these are where your use cases, these are how you're going to figure out how to apply VR, because we've already seen Hollywood do it for years. A great example I can give is a couple years ago when the Tesla truck came out. Tesla finally released his truck. And in the States, a lot of people were upset because they're like, it looks ugly. It looks very futuristic. But for those of us that grew up in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, when we thought of a futuristic truck, that's exactly what we thought of. And so it's really playing on that memory of experiences we've already had. All right. So now that I got through the inspiration, the the imagination to hold on to VR that to kind of really pull from. I mean, as we were talking right at the beginning, Ready Player One, fantastic movie about where VR can go. Every time I feel I need a little inspiration, I just need a little of that creative juice on identifying the new VR trends or things of that. I'll pull from these movies just to give me some clear ideas. Now, why? Why is VR? Why are we even looking at VR? I mean, we're a sales company. We sell pet food. Why do we need VR? Here's some of the things that we started seeing. So a couple of years ago, we started putting in full simulation training. So we learned that it takes average CPG representative or salesman about 80 conversations before they're considered proficient in sales. Well, that's 80 chances for a conversation with an actual live customer to go south. So what we start doing is throwing in kind of pick your own endings simulations where every decision point that they're asked during the simulation is dependent on how they asked the previous one. So they could get kicked out or they can make the sale. It really dictates how they play out the scenario. And when we started implementing these three numbers were just huge. So first we saw two of the biggest and most complex issues that we have in sales, which is negotiation and insight. We saw, a close to 200, if not more percent cognitive growth from the average first time they took the course to their best score. So even though their best score is a 73, they started off at a 26. And for negotiation, or these harder topics where you really can't practice in e-learning, we started seeing these huge numbers that just by going to a simulation, now let's throw in full immersion. Let's throw in that emotional investment of being completely surrounded 360. We already know immersion is potentially going to skyrocket comprehension. And now we have a benchmark of the comprehension we're getting outside of VR. So that was really kind of our second piece of our argument that we're seeing this great growth. Now let's put them in an immersive situation. So once we built those two arguments of the creative of what are the cool things we could do with the rationale of why we need to do it, we set up our proof of concept. So the first thing we had to do, and I highly recommend this, is level set the language across the company and across all the areas that you're going to be trying to bring on board. And what I mean by that is right now, everybody refers to VR as VR. It's virtual reality. When in reality, in reality, virtual reality. Sorry if I say that word entirely too much tonight. But no, the whole idea of there are various versions of virtual reality and so what I've actually started doing with my internal teams is I refer to it as immersive and digital reality. How you experience that digital reality is the vehicle that you choose. And that's where you get into augmented, which is typically your smartphone. A great example is Pokemon Go that came out a couple of years ago, was a huge win for augmented reality solutions. Then there is full virtual reality. These are the headsets. This is full 360 immersion, where you are actually in a virtual space. And then there's mixed reality, which is this is where basically where we're getting into with what Apple's trying to do. The new Levino glasses. So basically eyeglasses that contain computer readouts that basically as you look through it, your glasses become a HUD to the world. That's long, and that's where I think a lot of us really want to go long term, especially for our factories, knowing that we can't have full VR. But the thing is, if you keep referring to VR and you're referring to all three of these, it can get confusing, and you want to make sure that who you're trying to get buy-in from, everything is very transparent and very clear. As well as you don't want to put all your eggs into one basket. So for us, when we first started this journey about 3.5 years ago, the HoloLens had just come out. So for us, it was mixed reality all the way. But then the HoloLens 2 suffered a year of postponement. And in the meantime, the Quest came out, which completely changed VR. And so for us, we actually regrouped and said, all right, you know what? HoloLens, mixed reality is going to now become our long term goal. We just need VR. We need to start incorporating it. So we adapted to the Quest. So as new technology emerges, you really want to kind of keep an idea of what's coming out. So if you find something that's a better solution, for us, Oculus was the best solution because what it gave us was an administration tool. For consumer product goods, we take our security very, very serious. And so what we wanted was the ability that should a headset get lost, we have the ability to remotely wipe it, as well as we can control what information is on it. And Oculus, when they released the Quest, they had the admin tool ready to go. So for us, it was very much kind of a no-brainer. But again, always looking to see what the future is going to hold. All right. Now, one of the things that we encountered is everybody I've talked to numerous times, I've gone out and did these conversations. These are the 5 set questions everybody has about VR. In one form or another, they're all going to come down into one of these 5 buckets. So, will the technology work across generations? Um, will it have an impact? Will people get sick from it? Will it really increase training, or will the VRs just sit and become paperweights? Or will we see cognitive growth and employee engagement? And up until probably mid last year, there was very little ROI. It was very much kind of, we think, very theory. But we now have had a pilot team using full VR for majority of their tasks for the past 6 months. And we've started getting some answers on this. So for first example, generations. We've seen our baby boomers. Honestly, they are the biggest adapters to VR. They absolutely love it because they're used to talking to people face to face. This whole virtual meeting, this is not how they learn. They learned, door to door sales. I mean, it was very much that old school sales mentality. Whereas our younger crew, so our Gen Ys, what we're seeing out of them is they are so native to their smartphone that their first question is, can we just do it on our smartphone rather than doing it in VR? So we're really seeing that one, it works, but we're seeing our older generations, they are just thriving on it. They absolutely love it because they don't have to worry about control C to copy, control V to paste, or they don't have to remember all the shortcuts, all the things. They actually get to navigate it as if it's a real world. We're seeing, we already talked about the cognitive growth. One of the things that we recently did a survey, um, and we asked them that do they, to our team, to the pilot, if they believe VR will increase morale. Always kind of an interesting question because anytime we ask about new technology and increasing morale, we always get low results because that people like the way they've been doing things. Why do I need another system? And for VR, out of all the participants, we got 100% agreement that this will improve morale. Like I said, I've very seldomly have seen 100% agreement on new tech. And so we're starting to see that a lot of, people like it. Now, the other one I will talk about is the adverse reactions, because there is kind of a vertigo that happens to some people in VR. We're not really sure exactly what causes it. Um, A lot of it we kind of believe that what happens is your two primary senses, your vision and auditory, are being rerouted via the VR headset, whereas your other three senses are telling you physically you're in the real world, and that schism kind of disrupts can disrupt your mind. Now, the nice thing though is VR is habit or not habit forming. It's not addictive. Uh, it is uh, you can build I guess I want to say endurance in VR. So the more time you spend in it, the longer you can spend in it. Um, without getting sick, and you start learning little traits to avoid. Like for me, I avoid roller coasters because they'll make me sick in the real world. So when I go into VR, I am already apprehensive to avoiding any experience that's going to put me in a roller coaster environment. So you really do kind of start learning that. All right. So now that we have getting into the proof of concept, we have an idea of what tech we want to use. Now we have to really start figuring out from our inspiration, and you really need to spend some time on this, is figuring out your use cases. What are the biggest use cases that your company, that your audience can benefit from? And so for us, it was, as we started down this road, it kind of everything kind of fell in naturally into these three, because these were the big three that we do in our day to day. The first one was getting people to our factory. And all of this, remember, was pre-COVID. So for us, it was, we wanted to make sure that everybody that started at Nestle Purina had the ability to go to one of our factories and view it from the comfort of their own home. Because that way we're not endangering any production runs. We are not putting anybody in danger, as well as we're keeping our travel costs down by using VR to create. And this kind of became our big proof of concept that even VR would work. So when we started this, our first idea was the factory tour. And we looked at if this was going to prove whether we even continued with VR or not. So when we walked into it, we wanted something that was really flashy, that was really cool, but also very, very practical. And so for our use case, it came out to that we wanted to ensure that our sales team wasn't over promising to our customers. So we needed to be sure they understood how the factory works, and not just a factory tour. We needed to let them know that product isn't just sitting waiting for an order, that we have to forecast it and we have to plan accordingly. And so that's what we did. And then as we started branching, we realized shelf planning was huge. We needed the ability to recreate the shelves in a virtual space. So that way we're not wasting man hours setting up a new shelf to come back to it 2 days later saying, no, this is not going to work. As well as we could be very methodical that when we have our conversations with our customers, we're making the best choices. And then from there, it was the virtual meeting space. This was universal. This went beyond sales. This is how we knew eventually we were going to get everybody, is we needed the ability to meet face to face and add nonverbal communication back into our daily lives. I mean, the minute we went to text messaging, the minute we went to emails, we removed up to 80% of our communication style. So we removed the hand gestures, the nodding the heads. I mean, you wonder why we're confused when we're only receiving up to 30% of somebody's intended message. It's why the pit of our stomach drops when we get text messages from people, because there's no emotional context. There's no nonverbal to let us know, yeah, everything's okay, just need to chat. And so the meeting space became really we knew if we could get that, we were going to win everything. And so we really started. Now with COVID, all three of these use cases have launched exponentially, because one of the things that we're actually looking at is not COVID itself, but how the world has responded to this particular virus is different than it's responded to viruses throughout history. And so, but now the question is next year or the year after, when another virus emerges, are we going to respond the same way? And if so, for us, we want to be prepared that regardless of geographic or physical location, our job continues. That should stores be shut down again, rather than waiting for the store to open, we could be working with our customers and redoing their aisles, revamping their store. In other words, we can basically be taking the most out of that downtime to really ensure the success for our customers and for ourselves. Now, you can see there's a couple other use cases that we've really been trying to throw out there is a virtual training room and coaching simulations. Uh, those are things that we're kind of working on for 2021, and we're still kind of in the midst of defining um, those use cases because right now they're very much proof of concept on will it even work. So when I walk into any of this, the one thing that I benefit from is that I've now am 3.5 years entrenched. So as now VR is coming to the forefront, there is a scramble for hardware, for software, for applications. The big thing we have to, that I really keep in mind with VR is we have to be methodical because don't want this to be another false start for it. VR is closer than it's ever been um, to integrating into our everyday lives, and so we want to be methodical that when we release it to our workforce, it makes sense. And so what I've done is I kind of put together a little use case that when I develop a use case, I take about 12 months and I not only define the use case, but I determine is it even worth exploring? We have a ton of use cases, but some may not even be worth exploring or not worth exploring at this moment due to technology restrictions. But I really take 12 months and really run the use case through the gambit. So that way I'm prepared when I start the development and start talking this up and start getting my budget. I'm prepared for the arguments that are going to come. So I really say the 12 months, as you get a good flow and as you start getting used to this and you get your use cases, this 12 months each and every time dwindles down to where, you know what, I don't need as much time for this project or for that solution. But I always look at it 12 months as well as it's easier to surprise somebody with a shorter um, timeline than try to explain why you need more time. So it's just a little padding as well. 12 months to develop it. This is where you start going through your scrums, start going through your QA. What I typically do is I spend the first 6 months working with my vendors, developing the application. And then the next 6 months, I send it through the ringer. So I start sending it to people, letting people get into it without directly releasing it, and starting to make sure that all the bugs are out, everything looks good, and start advertising it to release it the following year. And then deployment can take up to 12 months. The big thing is, if the headsets are out, you know what, you have to work around the manufacturing of the VR headsets. If your company's changing servers for numerous reasons, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, the one thing we can count on with technology is we can count on it to fail right when we need it. And so that deployment gives you some time to make sure that when you deploy, it is smooth and nobody has anything negative to say. Because we already know new technology encourages negative statements because it's new and the newness scares us. All right. So when I did my use case with the factory tour, here's the parameters. So, and one thing you'll notice is there's very little KPI at this moment because we don't know what to measure. We don't know what success looks like with VR. So what we did is we did some very loose parameters in that we wanted 5 to 10 minutes that's going to take them through the manufacturing process, as well as they can come back to it at any time and go from station to station. We wanted it 360 immersive. So we didn't want to be a 360 image that people just view. We want it when people are in it, they see all the machines in full motion. They hear that ambient sound of the factory, as well as to create some 2D video to really enhance the experience. And I'll actually give you this is a little teaser. Sorry, I can't, there's not much of the tour we can show outside of Purina because it is proprietary equipment. So, but we do have this little teaser. So, and as you can see, it basically takes somebody through the various stages of the factory and it explains certain why we do certain things. So that way, when they talk to our customers, they have a better uh, comprehension of what we do, and they can better assist our customers. So, and this honestly has been probably the biggest success of the VR that we've had so far. This just when we did it, like I said, we did it for a very small crew, but because the vendor that we went to was just absolutely awesome. This is now integrated into our onboarding to where anybody that starts in Nestle Purina, we send them a headset. We walk them through the tour. They have it for about a week, and then they send it back. And so we just have gotten a lot of traction out of this, as well as it got us on Facebook's radar. So with Facebook and Oculus, getting on their radar really helped our case because it helped us build our ecosystem. And I'll talk about that a little bit later of how vital having an ecosystem of vendors and developers are for you. All right, so our pilot. So I just thought I'd include here's what it looks like when you're running a pilot of people on VR. It's a lot of headsets. But the thing that I like about this picture and why I show it is this is new technology. This is the first day we're all learning they're all learning how to use it. So it's the most frustrating day. But if you notice, almost every face that you can see is smiling. There was no screaming, there was no anger. People were excited to learn this tech. And that was one of the coolest things about the pilot that we're still in play is the team has embraced the technology to the point where they have accelerated my timeline as far as when we were going to introduce different functionality. They have actually been leapfrogging and saying, hey, we're going to do this. And they're basically taking the timeline of that deployment and they're now owning it to where they are full experts. So it's been very cool. So, and with that though, I will tell you it is important to have a control group. So we have one person that actually that's in the pilot and they're doing it without VR. So that way we can check the mobility that any VR solution we apply, anybody that potentially does not want to do VR is not excluded from the material, the experience, um, or the innovation. Okay, so I've kind of gone through the basics, or the basics of kind of how we did it. How we fought it through. And as you see throughout a lot of what I've talked about, it's been a lot of really preparing to tell a story that gets people convinced. Now, As far as the money people are concerned, I haven't talked a lot about. Um, for the money, it's explaining that the cost savings, especially when for our factory, if we were to say, let's say, send 100 people a month, an average of $2,000 per person, that's what, $20,000 per month at 12 months is a lot of money. Sorry, I have mentioned it is Saturday night here in the States. Um, no, but you start getting into that cost savings, as well as talk up that the Oculus Quest has already announced they're not changing software yet. So, and it's all Android-based software. So, one of the things that we've really been really leveraging with the people that control our finances and our budgets is that already we renew computers every 3 years. We life cycle computers. The average person life cycles their phone every 2 years. So the headset is designed under that same operation that every 2 to 3 years, if you can choose to upgrade, or you can choose to keep running the same VR headset you have been running. It's why I have friends that still have their old Nextel flip phones. They're not going to give them up. And we're seeing VR really follow through with that. So really playing on the resourcefulness of VR, the repetition of it, as well as uh, the longevity. Now, one question that people will have is that we get is, do we assign them one-on-one? Do we assign them out? For us, COVID really answered that question for us. We right before COVID last year, we were just engaging in that conversation. And as soon as COVID hit, it was everybody's going to get their own headsets. Now we do have about 4 or 5 that we send out that people can check out. But I do, every time I get those, I sanitize them and prep them. So it's easier to have a small sample that you can send out and prep. And other than that, just having the majority of the force is a one-on-one, especially with the Quest 2 having a $200 price break. It's just fantastic. Sorry, I'm done with my Oculus commercial. All right. So applications. So what we did is, and why I'm giving you this is because if you're looking for VR, and you're looking to do it, I want to give you what our format was, so that way you can adjust it to yours. You're not stealing anything that's proprietary. This is just, okay, here's kind of how it's more about let's get VR successful than let's pit companies against each other. So for the factory tour, it was enable our associates to gain greater insight on how we produce our food. Shelving, to be able to be flexible and be able to plan shelves regardless of geographic location. Again, with coaching and the virtual meeting. So again, very loose expectations, because you can't set measurements if you don't know what you're going to be able to measure. And so for us, it's very much been a very much kind of blind leading the blind in this. Now, this is why I like sharing, though, because so far you've heard me and my cheerleading of VR. But what I want to share with you is this is what some of the people have said concerning VR. So, such as the Clean Factory Tour, the 2 first ones I really want to highlight. So, one of the first responses we heard was better than the real tour. And we actually heard this from one of our chief HR officers. All new hires need to experience the virtual tour. We had heard this from one of our VPs. So now we have people at the top of our corporation seeing the value in training, which means now we get the top down trickle effect of training encouragement that we're always looking for. With the shelving, the sales coaching. The sales coaching, one of the great feedbacks that we got from this, I actually didn't include it here, but we had one of our salesmen who has been in sales for 25 plus years. He actually came out of it saying, he came out and saying, you know what, it's true. You don't know what you don't know. and even somebody like me can learn something. And he walked out with a greater knowledge of insight on his individual sales that he's never experienced in his 25 plus years of sales experience, and that was through the use of VR. Um, and then our spatial meetings, which I talked about, was the increased engagement. That now we're actually meeting with our customers in VR, and where we can have face-to-face conversations, and we have our nonverbal cues back. All right. Now, so our adoption use is basically what we used them for. So, because one of the things that I learned throughout this question that people have is not what it is, not how much it is, but what is it going to be used for? Why are we even doing this? It seems silly that we're using VR. Why do we need it? So have these answers ready for that. For us, we the tour, it was about onboarding. For the virtual meetings, it was about replacing Teams and adding nonverbal communication back to it. Yes, we just started going to Teams, we just started going to Zoom, but to have the ability to meet in a virtual room at any time is just unbelievable. And I'll actually show some samples. I actually have some samples that we can talk about in the question time. Oh, I'll move this because was kind of a neat thing. So out of our headsets, we have, like I said, we have a team of about 30. And what we're seeing is 16 or more are being logged in every day and being accessed and utilized for one thing or another. All right. So now lessons learned. Basically, what did we learn through our first 4 releases in VR? We're now up to about 8 different experiences in VR, but these were our first 4. The big thing we learned is be patient with training. You want to have small groups, because what happens is everybody gets as soon as people get the headsets on, it's like taking a grade school class on a field trip to the zoo. Everybody is looking at everything. Everybody's attention is focused on different things. And so you end up getting the same question and repeating the same answer. But again, it's about that patience of it. That it's not meant to be. It's not that they're not intentionally paying attention. VR, your first couple times into it is very overwhelming. Okay. Now, I provide the recognition, one, just so that way if you want to pull from any of this for examples, scenarios, please feel free. This is all public. But also, when I talk, it's important to know that VR is it is growing on a daily basis. And we're starting to see some really good companies reach out. And the big one is our Facebook Oculus case study that actually at the end of 2020 actually made it into the Harvard Business Review, which I never thought that would ever happen to me. Sorry, you'll hear me humble brag. Always humble is my keyword. And I'll make this PowerPoint available, but it also has links not only to the videos, but I also have a link to the actual case study that they did. Just taking a second to come up.
Thank you.
So and this is available for information. Like I said, they're the ones that kind of came out with the potential financial savings that we would have of up to $100,000 a year. With COVID, we're starting to see a little bit more, but again, we're careful what we're measuring because we're not sure what to measure. So it's kind of really exploring that.
Well, I have to say, Gene, that's very impressive. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Above all, it's hard to believe, especially without knowing, obviously, that a company like Purina, I mean, as you say, dog food isn't exactly at the top of the sphere, would go in this direction. And that
Now,
is really
let me,
quite
as we wrap
astonishing.
up,
Yeah, and to kind of show you, so yeah, because as you brought that up, because that's the question we get. So last year, no, yeah, last year, Spatial, who does the meeting software, they actually did an on-stage demo, and I'll kind of pull it up. So you're going to see this gentleman. So he's going to put a headset on right here, and this is just a black wall. But what he's going to do is actually go into a VR space where that black wall is going to be populated with with Purina stuff. And he's able to have it from multiple people. So now we're actually viewing it from from a VR point of view. So I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead. So here we have boarding of, brainstorming. What I'll actually show you. So here we actually, where is it? Right about here. So we see that we can review different product all in VR. In the real world, none of this exists. This is all strictly in that spatial room. But what you can see is we can actually regenerate it to where we are in a grocery store. And now we can set up our product and eventually at some point getting this into the factories to be able to look at machinery and CAD schematics in this space. Right. All right, so the ecosystem. I'm not going to talk too much about this, as we talk more about, but these are the companies that really have provided a fantastic ecosystem for me. And what I mean by that is it's not just always, going to them to buy a service and implement it. It's talking it through. So Valence, which is our digital transformation company, they focus on VR, on AI, everything. They're the ones that did our factory tour. And so I actually meet with them every other week just to talk about new technology. That's all we talk about. And so it's really to stay up on what some of the new things are coming. How can we even do it? So I come up with some crazy ideas, but if it weren't for them telling me which are actually feasible or not, I would waste so much time exploring limited solutions. 3D VRS is actually a company out of Australia that does some fantastic work taking existing files that CPG companies use and render it in VR, including the data. So that way, as you walk a shelf, you can exactly see eye levels, heat maps. I mean, we can really start applying some unique science to shelving. Acceleration, which is our role playing uptick. They actually have taken it on a new name. They actually just merged with Digital Chalk, and they are now called Silotech. So now the future for us is now we're going right now customer simulations in a virtual training room. That's where a lot of all of our future, and that's kind of where I'm looking at, is basically how can we curate all the share points that we have into a virtual space to enable real-time learning and navigation. Had to get that out. So that's kind of where we're at and what we've done and how it can be reproduced. It's really looking at your preparation, building your ecosystem, and being methodical in your use cases. Um, and always remembering using pop culture to basically give a visual to any story that you're trying to tell in all reality with virtual reality. So with that, I'll actually will open this to questions. Or if there's anything anybody wants to see or talk about, please. I have babbled for almost an hour.
Yeah, I think Priya has a question. Priya, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Jean your question?
Please.
Yeah, if you see on the chat, I think Priya just said
Hi.
that. Yeah, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Dominic, and thank you, Jane, for the wonderful presentation. Just wanting to learn about how to approach use cases in different industries. I'm most likely to look for healthcare. So, from whatever your experience has been in ideating an application or a solution to actually deploying it in the real world.
No, that's a great one. Yeah, because I provided a lot of sales use cases. No, for healthcare, huge use cases, and they're everywhere. My wife works at a hospital, so I've given this quite a bit of thought. But let's say the medical labs that work with test tubes and slides. What if you could recreate the pressure using haptic gloves that eventually are going to come out, being able to run lab tests in VR to prepare for it? The one use case I'm going to show you, HoloLens. Let's see if I can find it. So yeah, here we go. So this was a couple years ago. What they did is they used the HoloLens and used it for EMT workers. So when they show up to a 911 call, the sensors that they place on the body feeds into the headset. They can port a doctor in using the front-facing camera. So that way a doctor can get a visual of the patient at time of distress. This was actually a huge use case a couple years ago, but really
Wow.
shows the power of what healthcare can do. Another one, I don't have readily access to it. It was shared a while back at an Oculus Connect convention. But what Oculus team did is, and this is something that can really carry your weight in training. So what they did is they had somebody who was with an instructor being taught a short surgical procedure on the knee.
Mm-hmm.
They had another person doing it through a VR experience. So one was instructor led, one was a VR self-guided. The VR self-guided did it in 75% less time. They were able to comprehend and not master. I mean, they can't go out and perform the surgery tomorrow, but they were able to master and comprehend the topic in less time, because what they saw is the people that were with the instructor kept turning around going, am I doing it right? 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 They were constantly
Mm-hmm.
searching for that validation. Whereas VR, you can't move to the next step unless you get the previous step right. And so, yeah, so some really cool things have been coming out in the medical world. All you really have to do is just start Googling and start looking. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I came across a lot of good stuff. What would be interesting to learn is the whole cycle of how long it would take to, say, work on these projects, and depending on the complexity, because right now, the project that I work on does not interface anywhere near VR, but just a regular development cycle. But it would be good to get a comparison as to how long does it take to actually see real effects.
Yeah, and that really is just kind of an unfortunate. I wish I could give you a better answer that it's an unknown variable, but surprise, it is. No, and what I mean by that is, some of our development has been able to go quick, some long. Now, the nice thing is what you can do with your ecosystem is we reached out to companies that were very much startups. They were very much on the cusp of it. So, it was a win-win. So they were able to give us a little bit of deals because they were a new company, and plus we were Purina, offering them some great networking capabilities, whereas they're able to give us a little bit more on the technology side. So we started seeing that we really developed these relationships to where, a lot of these companies are already going that direction. So if we can help fund it for our solution, it again, it comes down to a win-win for both. And then there are some that like our factory tour actually is a great example. uh if we do any more moving forward, we already have the framework, so it's going to take it's going to cost half as much and take half as less time to do any more future tours, because we did all that work on the front end. So that's where you start seeing the repetition is where it pays off.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, can I ask one question? It seems like before I saw your development pipeline was like 1 month of research, 1 month development, and 1 year of research, 1 year development, and 1 year of deployment. I'm wondering, yes, that's like. Yeah, like right now, VR, AR, MR, like all the devices and all the technology that they change so fast. How can you, for example, like when you were preparing, for example, like let's say Oculus Quest for 12 months, and probably Quest becomes something else pretty soon while you were do the development. So how can you adapt for I know this is kind of like the ideal like time, but for me, when I join some startups and working on some project, it's usually like shorten the time, like probably like a few weeks. They need to come up with the MVP, or a few months they need to come up with MVP once the MVP got proven to be workable, like, and then later on they will add more feature. So this like they are more like a Scrum development, like getting small stuff, testing out work, and start adding more features. So can I ask you, like, and I see like you got some study cases. Do you see like because this is the Scrum kind of development, like the spiral kind of types of thing. It's kind of like the development circle that I learned. And can I ask you, like, how do you kind of like your experience for the 1 year preparation, 1 year development, and 1 year deployment? What do you see? What's pros and cons for a waterfall development style and Scrum? Like got a little bit and start putting out, and add a little bit and putting it out.
No, and you bring up a good point. So, like when we walk into it, so preparation. So when I do this 12 months, it's for multiple things. So I love the Scrum method. I think it's impactful. That way, you're not going too far down a rabbit hole before you can change something that is just unchangeable. So that's why I love the Scrum, and because it allows you to adapt to where the technology can change. So like for us, like I said, when we first start, HoloLens was everything. We put all our eggs in that basket because it was wireless. And then all of a sudden we heard rumors of the Quest. And as soon as we got confirmation, we scrubbed all of our HoloLens plans and said we want it all for Quest. But the nice thing was we did that about 6 months before the Quest came out. So as the Quest came out, we just got lucky. It just right time, right place. We were ready to go with 4 different applications, one of being the factory tour. Now, the big con is one, the technology can change. We know that. The nice thing though is with the VR community, um, they're doing things that they learn from video games and from PCs. So in other words, it's not going to be Windows versus Mac type stuff. They're designing basically everything's either being designed in Unity or Unreal, depending on what the functionality is. And almost all the headsets are some type of Android driven application, except for Apple. We'll see what they do in the next couple months. But so that's the nice thing, is that we were able to see some trends that made us feel comfortable saying, all right, you know what? I think we're good to invest, as well as what the Rift was around for 3 years and is still one of the premier headsets. So we already started seeing some longevity. Now, the other con, which is the one that's going to hit you, is you're going to run out of goodwill. You're going to keep telling people, imagine this, imagine that, imagine this, because you want it to be, it's got to be good the first time. This is one of those things that I've been on the end of this where it hasn't been perfect the first time. And so that goodwill, what eventually will happen is, people are going to see, after when I got to the first project, we got to that third year, the finance folks were like, all right, we're tired of spending money without seeing anything. And fair enough. But the nice thing is, once you get that first cycle done, so like right now, I have different experiences in each one of these 3 phases. And it's just a continuous circle now. So basically, imagine this is the forest Scrum method. That this is just to get a reoccurring, okay, each year, here's where we're going to go. And then the smaller Scrums keeps you on that timeline inside of each one. But if it gets out right and you start the advertisement halfway through your development, is when you start your advertisement. So the most people will wait is about 1.5 years before they see anything. And during that advertisement is when you just start showing everybody. And during that time is when you'll see a lot of people saying, I get it now, I get it now, I get it now. So it's just getting it in the headsets as soon as you have something viable that is safe. If that makes sense.
I see. Yeah, because in game develop, it seems like it's better to involve like the player, game player, like as early as possible. For example, like you come up with an idea within probably a few weeks, and you have a super small team because there's no budget. So it's just like a super small team, and create something within a few weeks. And then player jumps in and start playing it and give you feedback. Later on, once you kind of figure it out, what's good or bad, and you implement it, and next week, the player come back and start playing and giving more feedback. So so I'm wondering, is this just like a big timeline chunk, but still like using Scrum like during each phase, or you are like, for example, like preparation 12 months, just pen and pencil trying to draw a beautiful blueprint before jumping into development?
And that's when you're going through your mood boards, trying to determine, because now you have to think, instead of thinking 2-dimensional, you have to think about the 360 space. Which now, okay, so like as we started developing that virtual training room, we actually had to be very methodical, and it took us a couple months to build it, because it was very much building its own building. That when we got in, we had to figure out where we wanted windows, how we wanted the light to come in. And so it's a lot of those things that that you don't typically think about with your typical development. Now with game design and all that, a lot of the same, that whole idea, but you have to look at that. You have to create the game first. Now, a lot of times what we do is we buy a game license, load it up, and we start playing it. With VR, a majority of what we want to do doesn't exist outside of what an artist rendered, And so we need to be conscientious of that initial step. From there, that waterfall can pick up and really build momentum, and as well as keep in mind, I've been a team of one for 3.5 years. So it started off as a passion project that I just got very lucky with leadership, and I got very lucky with what happened in the space. I forgot where I was going with that.
The leadership.
Yeah, leadership. And so what we want to do is, so that's why I said, as you go through this, it can get faster. It can, you can start making shortcuts here and there, but really it's, looking at the micro picture and then the macro picture, of looking at those two things. So that way, we have an idea of, because in VR, you do have to have an idea of the end in mind. You have to have an idea of what you want it to look like when you're out of it.
Yep. Cool. Yep. And any other questions? Terry, do you have questions or anything you want to ask Jean? Okay. Yeah, cool. Thank you, Jean, and then joining our meetup today. And thank you, everyone, joining in today's meeting. And thank you. And I will send the folder to you, Jean, later on. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So
you're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, guys.